has the COVID-19 pandemic created a loophole allowing for the dismissal of DUI charges within the state? Well, that was similar to a recent headline article by CBS News, and I want to talk a little bit about what this article is referring to and the loophole that they're alleging now exists within the statute. So, the standard for a DUI investigation is partially laid out within the Colorado Revised Statutes, and it specifically requires an officer to offer a person that they suspect of drunk driving one of two tests. So either a blood test or breath test, and that's to determine the level of alcohol within that person's system at the time of driving. Now, cops aren't doing that right now. Most police agencies have suspended their use of a breath test based upon the ongoing pandemic. And that's fairly regular throughout the state. It's the case here in Colorado Springs, where I practice. And their reason for doing so is concerns about spreading the virus, the COVID-19 virus. So are they allowed to do that? Well, there is an exception to the test requirement that's laid out in the statute that says that if there is extraordinary circumstances which prevent a police officer from administering one of these two tests, then they can force the driver to take the other option. And so a few examples of this would be a power outage in the department that prevents them from administering the breath test, or malfunctioning equipment. A frequent used exception is if the officer is suspecting somebody of being on drugs rather than just alcohol. You can't get drugs from a breath test, so you have to do a blood test in that case. So those are often considered extraordinary circumstances. Some of them are specifically laid out in the statute, and courts will regularly allow the prosecution to proceed with evidence from the other test, even though there was only one test that was offered. So the question now becomes if this COVID-19 pandemic is going to amount to extraordinary circumstances for people that currently were not offered a breath test. And that's been the case for roughly 9 months now that most departments have suspended offering individuals that election. And so courts have treated this differently. And it's been on a judge-by-judge basis. Some judges are dismissing cases based on a violation of a person's statutory right to elect a breath test and the fact that that was not offered. Other courts are finding that because we're in the middle of a pandemic and this virus is spread through the air, that this puts officers in danger. And because of this, their decision not to allow these tests has constituted an extraordinary circumstance. There is no direction at this point from a higher court on how these lower trial courts should be handling these motions when they arise. It really is a case of first impression, and so a lot of this has become very judge specific. Now, the one recent development that has kind of skewed these cases in the favor of people accused of drunk driving is the fact that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, so the CDPHE is the acronym, which handles the standards for breath testing throughout the state, has come out and said that breath testing is safe, that officers can safely administer these tests at their department and not run an added risk of contracting the virus. And so what this new guidance from the CDPHE has done is it's placed this state agency, which is in charge for setting the standards for breath testing throughout the state, at odds with these individual police agencies that have made the unilateral decision to stop breath testing completely. Now, until we have guidance from either the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court on whether or not the extraordinary circumstances exception applies based on the coronavirus, individual cases are going to be treated on a case-by-case basis, depending on the specific judge that gets assigned that case as an issue of first impression. But there is a fair argument to be made that with the CDPHE coming out and saying that these tests are safe, that individuals who are not offered a breath test during a DUI investigation have had their rights violated. And if that's the case, then there is a good chance that evidence of whatever test ended up occurring could be subject to suppression by the judge handling the case.